She looked me dead in the eye and said, "He gives me what your miserable little salary never could." And years later, when she came back with nothing left, she was the one looking for me. Before I get into it, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling me what city you're listening from. My name is Daniel. I'm 29 years old, and for a long time, I believed my life was basically going the way it was supposed to. I studied psychology, though that choice was never fully mine. My father always pushed me towards something serious, something stable. He never cared much about what I actually loved or what I wanted for myself. To him, the only thing that mattered was that I didn't waste my time. So I ended up in college studying something I didn't hate, but never truly loved either. I learned what I had to learn. I adjusted. I graduated. After that, I got a job at a fairly small clinic. It wasn't some dream position, but it was steady. I had fixed hours, assigned patients, and a paycheck that, while small, was enough to live on. That was the stage of my life when I met Emily. She was my complete opposite in a lot of ways. She was strong, confident, and direct. She always seemed sure of what she wanted. She came from a family that never had much money, and that shaped the way she looked at life. Right from the start, she told me she never wanted to live like her parents did. She said she refused to live with limits or money problems. At first, I admired that about her. She had clear goals. She wanted to travel, own a big house, dress well, and go out to nice restaurants without ever checking the prices. I was much simpler than that. I didn't need a lot to feel at peace. Still, I wasn't against wanting more either. We started dating, and for the first few months things felt pretty normal. We went out now and then, had long conversations, and talked about a future that felt possible. We both seemed to be working toward it. After 2 years together, we decided to move in. That was probably the moment when everything started to shift. At first, sharing a place felt like the natural next step. We found a modest apartment that fit what I could afford without wrecking my finances. Emily agreed to it, but I still remember the look on her face the first time she saw it. She smiled, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile people give just to be polite. "It's okay," she said. "This is temporary, right?" I nodded. Back then, I truly believed it was. The first few months of living together were a strange mix of good moments and quiet tension. I worked long hours at the clinic. Even on my days off, I picked up extra appointments. On holidays, weekends, and days when most people wanted to rest, I worked if there was a chance to make a little more money. I wasn't doing it only for myself. I was doing it because I wanted to build something. I knew what kind of life Emily wanted, and in some way, I wanted to give that to her too. But there was a problem. To her, money wasn't something you managed. It was something you used. Every time I got paid, it felt like she already had a list in her head of what it should go toward. Clothes, dinners out, things that weren't exactly necessary, but that she somehow treated like they were. At first, I tried to adjust. I thought it was just about balance. I thought we could find a middle ground. We couldn't. The argument started in small ways. Little comments, small criticisms dressed up like advice. "You can't live like this forever," she would say. "You work way too much for way too little." I tried to explain that I was still at the beginning. That experience mattered too. That eventually I could aim higher. But she didn't see it that way. To Emily, a person's value was tied closely to how much money they could make. At first, she never said it outright. But it showed in the way she talked, in the comparisons she made, and in the stories she told about other people. "One of my friends has a boyfriend who makes 3 times what you do," she said once, like it was just some random comment. I didn't answer. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was starting to realize that any reply would only lead to a bigger fight. Even so, I kept trying. I worked more hours. I took on more patients. I cut my own expenses so I could cover the things she wanted. But something never added up. No matter what I did, it was never enough. That was when I started questioning a lot of things. Not only the relationship, but my own life too. Psychology had never really been my choice. It was something I knew how to do. something that paid me, but it wasn't something that inspired me. Every day at the clinic felt heavier than the one before. Listening to other people's problems while ignoring my own started to wear me down. And in the middle of all that, an idea that had been sitting in the back of my mind for a while came forward. My own business. Nothing huge at first, nothing that promised instant results. Just something that would be mine. Something I could build from the ground up. Something that, with time, could really grow. The idea for the taqueria came almost by accident. I had always liked cooking, and at get-togethers or small events, people always praised whatever I made. I never took it seriously in the beginning, but little by little, it started to feel like a real possibility. When I finally brought it up to Emily, her reaction was exactly what I had quietly feared. It wasn't a direct no. It was worse than that. "A taqueria," she repeated with a small smile. She said it like it sounded interesting, but her tone told a different story. I explained the idea. I told her about the plan I had. I said I would start small and reinvest what I made so the business could grow. I talked about short-term sacrifice for long-term results. She nodded, but it was obvious she wasn't buying it. Even so, I went forward. I quit the clinic. It was one of the hardest choices I had ever made, but it was also one of the only ones that felt fully mine. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something because I wanted to do it. The first few months were rough. I didn't have much money to start with, so I worked with the basics. A small place. Simple equipment, long, exhausting days. I practically lived between the business and home. I learned as I went. Suppliers, costs, customer service, mistakes that cost me money, small wins that barely made up for them. But something was different. Even though I was exhausted, I felt more alive. At home, though, things were going the other direction. Emily got more and more uncomfortable with what I was doing. At first, she didn't say it openly, but I could feel it in her behavior. The sarcasm, the awkward silence. The looks that said more than words. "So, how'd that go today?" she would ask sometimes, without even saying the word, taqueria. Eventually, she stopped pretending. "I can't believe you left your job for this," she said one night during an argument that started over something stupid. "You went from having something stable to selling tacos." I tried to explain that it was a process, that no business grows overnight, that it needed time, but she didn't care about the process. She only cared about the result. At the beginning, the money coming in was limited, just like I expected. Instead of spending it, I did what seemed logical to me. I reinvested most of it. To keep some balance, I paid myself a personal salary that was basically the same as what I used to make at the clinic, enough to cover the basics without slowing the business down. To me, that made sense. To her, it didn't. "You're cheap," she told me one afternoon. "Now you have your own business, and you still live like you have nothing." I explained it again. Calmly, I tried to make her understand. "If I don't reinvest, the business won't grow," I told her. "This is long-term." Her answer came fast. "Then it's a garbage business." That sentence hit different, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. No hesitation, no room for doubt, like it was a fact. "I've watched enough shows to know how business works," she went on. "On Shark Tank, businesses make millions. If yours doesn't, then it's worthless." I stayed quiet for a few seconds. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because in that moment, I finally understood something I had been avoiding. We were not looking at life from the same place. "Not all businesses start like that," I said at last. "That's TV. That's not real life." She shook her head, clearly irritated. "Well, your reality is mediocre," she said. "And I'm not staying in it forever." The silence after that was brutal. It wasn't the kind of silence that gets broken by another argument right away. It was heavy, dense, like something between us had split for good. Emily didn't look away. If anything, she looked more sure than ever. "Actually, I've been thinking about it," she said, crossing her arms, "and I think I'm leaving." Then she looked at me and said, "Honestly, I thought you were different. It took me a while to see it, but you're mediocre." I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that would matter. The way she said it made it clear this wasn't anger from the moment. This was a decision she had already been making for a while. I just looked at her. That seemed to throw her off for a second, but she recovered fast. "Also," she added, glancing away, "I met someone." That got a reaction out of me, even though I tried not to show much. "Someone?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Yes." "His name is Jason," she said bluntly. "He's older than me, but he knows what he's doing. He owns a construction company." She paused, like she wanted me to sit with it. "And he makes a lot more money than you." At that point, it wasn't just a comparison anymore. It was a statement, a deliberate one. I felt this strange mix of anger and something harder to name. It wasn't exactly shock. Deep down, I think I had already sensed something like this might happen. "Since when?" I asked. "Does that even matter?" she shot back. "What matters is that he knows what he wants. He's not pretending to be an entrepreneur with some business that can barely survive." "I'm not pretending," I said, this time with more force. "Of course you are," she snapped back. "You left a stable job to sell tacos. Do you seriously expect anyone to take that seriously?" "It's a business," I said, "and it's growing." She gave a short, dry laugh. "Growing?" she repeated. "Please, Daniel." "You're lying to yourself." The argument escalated fast after that. "Not everything happens overnight," I told her. "Things take time." "Time is the one thing I'm done wasting," she replied. "Just like that?" I asked. 2 years together and you're just leaving?" "It's not that simple," she said, though her face said otherwise. "I just finally understood who you are." I shook my head. "No," I told her. "You understood who you think I am, but you have no idea what I'm building." "What you're building is worthless," she cut in. "And I'm not going to sit around waiting for it to maybe work someday." There was another silence, but this one was shorter. The tension had already reached the top. "And he is?" I asked. "Jason is what you want?" She looked right at me. "He gives me what your miserable little salary never will." That line landed like a punch. She didn't yell it. She didn't scream. That made it worse. She said it calmly, with full confidence, like it was something obvious. For the first time in that whole fight, I had no words. Not because I didn't have any arguments left, but because I understood that she wasn't only talking about money. She was talking about how she saw me, what I meant to her, what I represented, and there was no fixing that. Emily grabbed her purse like the whole thing had already been settled before we ever started talking. "I'm not doing this anymore," she said. "This isn't the life I want." She walked toward the door without looking back. Right before leaving, she stopped for a second. "I hope one day you understand," she added. Her tone made it obvious she didn't actually care whether I did. Then she left. The door shut hard. I stood there without moving. I didn't go after her. I didn't try to stop her. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken in the usual way. It felt more like emptiness, like everything I had been trying to build in my personal life had collapsed in a few minutes. But, weirdly enough, I didn't feel like quitting. The next morning I got up early, went to the taqueria, and opened like it was any other day. At first, everything felt strange. The silence at home, the absence of her voice, even her criticism. Somehow, all of that had become part of my routine. But slowly, I started noticing something else. There was less noise, less pressure. For the first time in a long time, I could focus fully on what I was doing without having to justify every decision I made. That changed everything. I started organizing the business better. I reviewed expenses. I adjusted prices. I improved the quality of some ingredients. I tried small strategies I hadn't had the time or energy to think through before. I also started listening more closely to customers. What they liked, what they didn't, what could be better. The first changes weren't dramatic, but they were steady. Week by week, more customers started coming in. Nothing explosive. Just enough to make it clear that something was working. Every extra peso went back into the business. I kept paying myself the same salary I had set from the beginning. Even once I had the chance to give myself more, I didn't do it. I knew what the goal was. There were hard days, of course, slow sales, problems with suppliers, deep exhaustion. But there was one huge difference now. I didn't have someone in my ear telling me everything I was doing was useless. That may sound small, but it completely changed how I handled everything. As time went on, I started making more ambitious moves. I invested in better equipment. I expanded the menu a little. I worked on the image of the place. I even started thinking about opening a second location, even though that was still a long way off. Months passed, and little by little, the taqueria stopped being just an attempt. It became a real business. Not in the overnight millionaire way she used to talk about, but in the real way, solid, stable. Growing all the time. Some nights after closing, I would sit for a few minutes and just look around the place, thinking about everything that had happened. And even though I never said it out loud, I would sometimes think about Emily. Not with longing, just with a kind of delayed clarity. I understood then that she had never really believed in me. She was never interested in the process. She only cared about the finished result. Deep down, she wasn't willing to build something with anyone. She just wanted to show up once it was already done. Instead of breaking me, that realization pushed me harder. Every small win felt fully mine. No outside approval, no comparisons, no voice telling me it wasn't enough. And that's how my life started changing, even though I didn't notice the exact moment it happened. Not all at once, not through luck. Step by step, day by day, decision by decision. Until one day I reached a point that even I wouldn't have believed possible a few months earlier. Time did what time always does. It moved forward. The taqueria went from being an uncertain gamble to a solid business. Then there were 2, then 3. Before I fully realized it, I wasn't serving every customer myself anymore. I was managing teams, checking numbers, organizing schedules, and handling bigger problems. I opened more locations, but never recklessly. Every new branch came after months of planning and making sure the last one could run without depending entirely on me. I didn't want fast growth. I wanted good growth. And that's what I built. For a long time, I kept living on very little. While most people would have started spending the moment they saw real money, I did the opposite. I stayed with the same simple lifestyle I had at the start. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Eventually, I bought a house. It wasn't flashy, but it was in a private, quiet, safe neighborhood. For the first time, I felt like I had something that was fully mine. Something that didn't depend on anyone approving of it. I also gave myself one indulgence. I had always loved big trucks. I didn't need to justify that. I just did. So I bought a big, flashy, well-equipped pickup. Part of me could say it was useful for the business. Another part knew it was personal. I didn't pretend otherwise. After everything that had happened, I had no problem admitting that. My life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, ordered, built on purpose. And then one day, the past showed up without warning. I was at one of the newer locations. It wasn't the biggest one, but it was one of the most important strategically. I was checking inventory, talking with the manager, and working through some operational details. It was a normal day, until I saw her. I didn't notice her right away. She didn't walk in with confidence or with that presence she used to have. Honestly, she blended in for a few seconds. But then I looked up, and there she was, Emily. She looked thinner, more tired. There was something on her face that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just time, it was wear, real wear. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there a few feet away, like she wasn't sure if she should come closer. I didn't speak either. I just watched her. Finally, she walked over. "Hi, Daniel." Her voice was different now. It didn't have that same firmness. Hi, I said, with no emotion. An awkward silence followed. She looked around the place, like she was trying to take it all in. I've seen what you've done, she said. You have several locations now. Yes, that was all I gave her. I wasn't there to show off. I wasn't there to explain anything. She nodded slowly. You can tell, she said. Everything looks good. I didn't answer. There was nothing to add. She took a breath, like she was getting ready to say something hard. Daniel, I want to apologize. She said it directly. No decoration, no build-up. I looked at her and kept the same expression. I was unfair to you, she said. I was ambitious. No, worse than that. I was greedy. I thought I knew what I wanted, but really I just wanted money. An easy life. I didn't care how I got it or who I got it from. She lowered her eyes. And I was wrong. I stayed quiet. I knew she wasn't done. Jason, she said, and the shame showed in her face. He never owned a construction company. I let out a small laugh. Short, cold, no humor in it. What a shock. She closed her eyes for a second, like she had expected that. He lied to me, she continued. All of it was fake. He was pretending. He convinced me to take out loans in my name. He said it was temporary. He said he was going to invest it. He promised he'd pay me back later. She paused. Then he disappeared. That word stayed hanging there. He left me with debt. A lot of debt. The silence after that felt different. Not awkward, revealing. I looked at her from head to toe. She wasn't the same woman who walked out on me, but she also wasn't some stranger. She was the result of her choices. And now you're here, I finally said. Yes, she answered. Why? Because I know I hurt you, and because... She hesitated. Because I want to fix things. Something inside me shifted then. Not toward her. Toward the situation. Fix things? I repeated. Yes, she said softly. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but... I cut her off. No, you don't. She went quiet. She didn't fight back. She didn't get louder. She just nodded a little. And somehow, that bothered me even more. You know what's interesting? I said, taking a step toward her. Everything you see here, I gestured around the place. I built it exactly the way I told you I would. She said nothing. Slowly, by reinvesting, by not wasting money, by not chasing instant results. Then I looked right at her. Exactly the thing you called mediocre. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Daniel, I shouldn't have... I cut her off again. Let me finish. I wasn't yelling, but every word carried weight. You left with someone because he gave you what my miserable little salary never could. I saw her swallow hard. And what exactly did he give you? I asked. Debt? Lies? Abandonment? I stepped a little closer. Funny, right? The silence got heavy again. And now you come here, I said, after it all went wrong, to apologize to me and see if you can get back some part of what I built. She shook her head. It's not like that. This time, I laughed more clearly. Of course it is. I looked straight at her and didn't soften any of it. You didn't come back when I had nothing. You didn't come back when I was just getting started. You came back now. That hit her harder than any insult could have, because she knew I was right. I understood you, Emily, I said. A lot better than you ever understood me. She said nothing. You care about the result, not the process. You care about the money, not how it's made. And more than anything, you care about being on the winning side. Tears finally filled her eyes. I'm not that person. Yes, you are, I answered instantly. No doubt, no pity. And the worst part is, it's not like you didn't know what you were doing, I went on. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just thought you were going to win. The silence was total. But you lost. That word hit harder than anything else I'd said. Not just because of the way I said it, because of what it meant. Daniel, please. That was the first time she sounded desperate. I have no one, she said. I'm in debt. I lost everything. I looked at her for a few seconds, not judging her situation. just checking what I felt. And the answer was simple. Nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even satisfaction. Just distance. That's not my problem. She stood there without moving. You made your choices, I said. Just like I made mine. I turned to walk away, but stopped for 1 second. The difference is, I accepted the consequences of my choices from the start. Now leave. I don't want to see you again. Emily stayed frozen, like she couldn't fully process what had just happened. Then she broke. The tears came fast, and she couldn't stop them. I'm sorry, she said in a broken voice. I really am. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I repeated. I don't have time for cheap apologies. That was what finally crushed whatever she still had left. She covered part of her face with one hand, trying to hold back the sobs, but it didn't work. Everything she had been trying to hang on to, pride, control, dignity, was falling apart right there. I don't even have money for food, she said, almost under her breath. I turned my head slightly. Mike, I called out. One of the employees had been watching from a distance without stepping in. He came over right away. Yes, boss? He stood beside me, waiting. I pointed toward Emily. Give the lady an order of 3 steak tacos and walk her to the exit. Mike hesitated for just a second. Maybe the contrast between the scene and what I said surprised him, but then he nodded. Sure. Emily wasn't trying to convince me anymore. She wasn't asking for another chance. She was just standing there, shattered. She gave a small nod, almost like a reflex. But when Mike motioned for her to come toward the counter, she shook her head. No, she murmured. I don't want anything. She still didn't look up. Then she slowly turned around and walked toward the door. The only sounds left were her footsteps and the quiet sound of her crying. Right before she stepped out, she paused for 1 second. Then she left. The door closed behind her, and with that sound, it all closed too. I stood there in silence for a few seconds. Everything okay, boss? Mike asked. I nodded. Yeah, get back to work. He didn't ask anything else. Nobody did. Life kept moving. Orders kept coming in. More customers kept walking through the door like it was any other day. That chapter was over. Hours later, after I closed up, I walked out to the parking lot. My truck was there, big and imposing, exactly the way I had wanted it. I got in, started the engine, and sat there for a few seconds with both hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't thinking about Emily. I was thinking about everything that had happened since the day she left. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment when quitting would have been easier, and how all of it, in the end, had brought me exactly where I was. Not through luck, not because somebody helped me, because of me. I put the truck in gear and drove off. The city was the same as it had always been. But I wasn't, and that was enough.